What if, on a stormy night, you saved a stranger from a wrecked car, only to learn she's on a run from one of the most powerful criminals in the world? What if everything you thought you knew about yourself was thrown into chaos, and your quiet life became the battleground for a deadly game of survival? One man's decision will set off a chain of events that could change everything, and it all starts with a simple choice. A flicker of white pierced the rain-soaked darkness. A sedan, its front crumpled against a tree, sat abandoned on the roadside. Eric's stomach lurched. He pulled over, boots sinking into mud as he sprinted toward the wreck. The driver's door was jammed, but through the shattered window, he saw her, a woman, blood trickling down her pale face, her eyes wide with raw panic. She was alive. "Hold on," Eric yelled, grabbing a crowbar from his truck. He wedged it into the door, muscles straining as the metal groaned and gave way. The woman slumped forward, her breath shallow. She was young, late 20s, with dark hair matted to her skin. Her trembling hand clutched his wrist. "Don't trust anyone," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the storm's chaos. "They're coming for me." Eric's blood ran cold. Her words were a warning, sharp and urgent. "Who's coming?" "What's happening?" he demanded, but her eyes fluttered shut, and she went limp. He checked her pulse. Faint but there, no time to think. He lifted her from the wreckage, her slight frame heavier than expected, and carried her to his truck. The storm seemed to chase them, thunder cracking like gunfire. He drove to the only safe place he knew, an old hunting cabin his father had left him, hidden deep in the forest. It was a rotting shell, but it was off the grid, invisible. Inside, he laid the woman on a musty cot, wrapping her wounds with a faded first aid kit. Her whispered warning echoed in his mind. Don't trust anyone. What had he stumbled into? Eric wasn't a hero, just a single dad trying to keep his kid fed. Yet here he was, tangled in something bigger than himself. The cabin's lone bulb buzzed, casting shadows as the woman stirred. Eric sat on a splintered chair, his eyes never leaving her. She blinked awake, her green eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "Where am I?" she croaked. "Safe. For now," Eric said, voice gruff. "I'm Eric. Pulled you from that wreck. You said people are coming. Start talking." She hesitated, then sat up, wincing as she touched the bandage on her forehead. "My name's Clara. Clara Weiss. That wasn't an accident. They ran me off the road." Eric's jaw tightened. "Who's they?" Clara's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "My father's men. He wants me dead." Eric leaned back, skepticism worn with the fear in her eyes. "Your father? Why would he?" "Because I know too much." Clara's gaze was fierce, defiant despite her trembling hands. "My father is Friedrich Donovan, the billionaire. He's not just a tycoon. He's a criminal. I overheard him planning to kill me. I'm a liability." Eric's mind reeled. Friedrich Donovan was a titan, tech mogul, philanthropist, a name plastered on skyscrapers and charity galas. But Clara's terror was undeniable, her whispered warning in the storm too raw to be a lie. "Why you?" he pressed. Clara looked away, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. "I was the perfect daughter," smiling for cameras, ignoring the whispers about his business. But I started digging. Found files, overheard calls. He's into things that'd make you sick. Human trafficking, blackmail, worse. I confronted him. That was my mistake. Eric rubbed his face, exhaustion clawing at him. "So what? You're on the run now." Before Clara could answer, headlights sliced through the cabin's grimy windows. A black SUV rolled up, its engine a low growl. Two men stepped out, their silhouettes sharp against the rain. One carried a flashlight, the other a pistol that gleamed in the storm's flicker. "Get down!" Eric hissed, yanking Clara behind the cot. His heart hammered. He was no fighter, just a guy with a toolbox and a kid to protect. But Clara's grip on his arm, her shallow breaths, stirred something stubborn in him. A refusal to let these men win. The door creaked open. "Clara," a voice barked, cold and commanding. "We know you're here. Don't make this messy." Eric grabbed a wrench from his toolbox. It was heavy, solid. He motioned for Clara to stay low and crept toward the door. The first man stepped inside, flashlight sweeping the room. Eric swung the wrench, catching him in the temple. The man dropped like a stone. The second lunge, but Clara tripped him with a broom handle, and Eric landed a blow to his skull. They were out cold. "We gotta move," Eric said, grabbing Clara's hand. They bolted into the forest, the storm swallowing their tracks. Branches tore at their clothes, the darkness both shield and threat. Clara stumbled, but Eric pulled her along, his mind racing. Who were these men? How far did Friedrich's reach extend? They ran until dawn, the rain easing to a drizzle. Eric led Clara to a clearing where Ben Carter, an old friend of his father, lived in a fortified trailer. Ben was a grizzled ex-cop, paranoid and armed but fiercely loyal. If anyone could help, it was him. Ben listened to their story, his weathered face unreadable as he sipped black coffee. "Friedrich Donovan, huh?" he said, spitting into the dirt. "Always figured that snake was rotten. You got proof?" Clara shook her head. "Not yet, but there's a safe in his office. Documents, recordings, everything. If I can get to it, I can bury him." Eric ran a hand through his damp hair. "And what's stopping him from killing you the second you try?" Clara's eyes locked onto his. "You." Eric laughed, bitter and tired. "Lady, I'm a mechanic, not a damn spy. I got a kid to think about." "Then why'd you save me?" Clara's question was a blade, cutting through his defenses. It stopped him cold. Why had he? He could have driven past that wreck, gone home to Lena, kept his head down. But her whispered warning, her desperate eyes, had hooked him. Maybe it was a memory of his own failures, his wife abandoning them, the banks circling like vultures. Maybe he wanted to prove he could be more than a screw-up. Ben clapped Eric's shoulder. "You're in it now, son. No backing out." Ben's plan was insane, but their only shot. Infiltrate Friedrich's office in the city, crack the safe, steal the evidence. He gave them a burner phone, fake IDs, a rusted van, and a .38 revolver Eric prayed he wouldn't need. They hit the road, the silence between them thick. Clara stared out the window, her face a mask, but Eric caught her stealing glances at him, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You got family?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah, Lena, 9 years old, smarter than me." Eric's voice warmed, despite the ache in his chest. "She deserves better than a dad who's always broke." Clara's lips curved faintly. "She's lucky to have you." Eric snorted. "Tell that to the bill collectors." They reached the city at dusk, Friedrich's tower gleaming like a blade against the skyline. Ben's contact, a disgruntled ex-employee named Marcus, had slipped them blueprints and a code to bypass lobby security. They slipped in through a service entrance, dressed as janitors. Eric's hand shook as he hot-wired the camera system, tricks from his teenage years proving useful. Clara led the way to the top floor, her steps silent but urgent. Friedrich's office was a temple of power, polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that screamed untouchable. The safe was hidden behind a portrait of Friedrich, his cold eyes staring down. Clara punched in a code, her mother's birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside were files, USB drives, a leather-bound ledger. Clara skimmed the document, her face draining of color. It's worse than I thought. He's trafficking people, bribing judges, funding private militias. He's untouchable because he owns everyone. Eric shoved the evidence into a duffel bag. Not after tonight. The light snapped on. Friedrich Donovan stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 men with guns. He was tall, silver-haired, his smile of predators. "Clara, my dear, you've disappointed me." Eric's heart sank. Marcus had betrayed them. They were trapped. Friedrich's gaze slid to Eric. "And you, Mr. Bauer, a nobody with a knack for trouble. Why risk your life for her?" Eric's grip tightened on the bag. "Because someone's got to stop monsters like you." Friedrich's laugh was ice. "Kill them. What would you do if the truth cost you everything?" That's the question Eric faced as the first gunshot shattered the silence. He dove behind the desk, dragging Clara with him. Bullets tore through the room, splintering wood and glass. Eric's mind flashed to Lena, Her gap-toothed smile, the promise he'd made to always come home. He couldn't die here. Not like this. Clara, trembling but fierce, whispered, "Service elevator. End of the hall." Eric nodded. He grabbed a crystal paperweight and hurled it at the chandelier, plunging the room into darkness. They crawled through the chaos, bullets grazing the air. One clipped Eric's arm, pain flaring hot, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. They reached the elevator, doors sliding shut as gunfire echoed behind them. The evidence was still in Eric's hands. They weren't done yet. They ditched the van in an alley and holed up in a dingy motel, the kind where no one asked questions. Clara cleaned Eric's wound with a bottle of cheap vodka, her hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. "You could have left me," she said. "Why didn't you?" Eric stared at the cracked ceiling, the weight of her question pressing down. "Because you're someone's daughter, too," he said finally, "and no one should be left to die." Clara's eyes softened. For a moment, they were just two people, bruised and battered, bound by a shared fight. Ben met them at dawn, his face grim. Friedrich's got the city on lockdown. Cops, media, he's got strings everywhere. But I know a guy at Channel 9, Paul Grayson. Old school, hates corruption. Get him the evidence, and he'll air it. The broadcast was their last hope. They met Paul in a deserted parking garage, his wiry frame tense as he skimmed the files. "This'll bring down half the government," he said, eyes wide. "You sure about this?" "Do it," Clara said, her voice steel. But Friedrich wasn't done. As they left the garage, a black SUV screeched toward them. Eric shoved Clara behind a dumpster, the revolver heavy in his hand. The driver opened fire, bullets pinging off concrete. Eric returned fire, his shots wild but enough to make the SUV swerve. They ran, zigzagging through alleys until they lost their pursuers. Paul aired the story that night. The nation watched, stunned, as Clara's voice narrated the evidence. Recordings of Friedrich's orders, documents tying him to atrocities. Hashtags exploded on social media. Hashtag Donovan exposed. Hashtag Justice for Clara. Protests swarmed Friedrich's tower. His empire cracked, then shattered. Friedrich was arrested by morning, his smug mask on as cameras flashed. Clara, now under federal protection, was free to rebuild. Eric watched it unfold on a grainy TV in his trailer, Lena asleep against his shoulder. He'd done it. For once, he'd been enough. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, Clara appeared at Eric's trailer, her hair shorter, her eyes less haunted. Lena ran out, hugging her like family. Clara handed Eric a notebook, Friedrich's handwriting scrawled inside. Eric's name was there, listed as enemy number 3. "You were his nightmare," Clara said, a faint smile breaking through. "You saved me. Not just my life, but me." Lena tugged Clara's hand. "Stay for dinner. Dad's spaghetti's awful, but we got ice cream." Clara laughed, and they sat around a wobbly table, sharing a meal that tasted like redemption. The storm was gone, but its lessons lingered. Ordinary people, broken and flawed, could topple giants. Eric looked at Lena's grin, at Clara's quiet strength, and knew he'd carry this fight in his bones forever. They weren't just survivors. They were warriors. Outside, the stars burned bright, a clear sky promising new beginnings. Eric raised a glass of cheap soda. "To fighting back," he said. Clara clinked her glass against his. "To winning. And if you're gripped by this tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that pull you in and don't let go. Your support keeps these battles alive."